Zhou Yi heavily drags a huge piece of the monster's shell on his back, gritting his teeth from exertion. Other people can be seen behind, also carrying parts of the carcass, and the sun casts a reddish light on the streets. In the center of the street lies a giant, dead creature with sharp teeth and insect-like eyes. A man from above shouts loudly, ordering everyone not to stop or they will be left without dinner. The workers continue to dismantle the carcass, some already weakened and collapsing from fatigue. The man at the top demands that no one stop and keep dragging until he collapses. One of the men struggles to get up, apologizing. Zhou Yi bent under the weight, trying not to fall. A suppressed cry of despair escapes from his lips. A stout man stands behind him, shouting that Zhou Yi is trash and demanding that he not hesitate. Zhou Yi, gritting his teeth, agrees and continues working. Zhou Yi's eyes reflect determination and depression. He introduces himself. "My name is Zhou Yi," mentally adding that he is just an ordinary person trying to survive in this hell. 2026. The cityscape looks peaceful. The blue sky and high-rise buildings give the illusion of normal life. Suddenly, the tranquility collapses. The city is hit by a catastrophe beyond scientific explanation. Giant monsters burst out of the ground. Worms and monstrous creatures wreaking havoc and destruction. Humans faced endless hordes of monsters that turned the earth into a deadly dungeon. This nightmare was called the Abyss. The Abyss released an unknown radiation from which some people gained supernatural abilities. Those who received these powers were called the Awakened, but those who had not awakened their abilities were forced to do the dirtiest and hardest work to survive. Zhou Yi and a group of men drag a huge piece of shell while someone shouts to indicate where to carry it. Workers are loading parts of the monster carcass into a truck with their last strength. Shouts are heard, giving the command to push. Zhou Yi and another worker fall to their knees in front of the truck, exhaling in exhaustion. Before he can catch his breath, Zhou Yi notices a punch flying at his face. A man with a cold stare slaps him sharply on the cheek. His attacker yells at him, accusing him of deliberately trying to look pathetic. His voice is full of irritation. Zhou Yi lowers his head, holding his face, but remains silent. Then he raises his head, his lips curving into a grin. He asks the commander if his arm is tired from the blow. The commander looks at him with contempt and demands that he continue working, or else let him leave. Zhou Yi grits his teeth and agrees. The commander demands that the carcasses be moved before dark, or no one will get any food. Zhou Yi confidently replies that they will do everything. Suddenly, a huge chunk of the monster's carcass begins to move, causing everyone nearby to panic. Zhou Yi warily looks at the trembling ground, suggesting that it might be an earthquake. In front of him, a giant monster with a huge mouth appears out of the ground, ready to swallow him whole. Zhou Yi's eyes widen with horror. He realizes that this is the end. The commander, looking at what's going on, notices in shock that one of the monsters is still alive. People run away in panic, screaming in fear as the giant creature lashes out. Zhou Yi rushes as hard as he can, but the commander, not letting him get away, rushes after him. The commander abruptly fires a powerful shot accompanied by an explosive flash. Zhou Yi gets shot in the leg and flies forward, blood spurting from the wound. Zhou Yi is breathing heavily, his face distorted with fear, but he still turns his head, reacting to the voice. The commander points his gun at him with a smirk, savoring the moment. Zhou Yi falls to the ground, blood flowing from the wound on his leg. At this time, the commander is laughing, enjoying the situation. He says with disdain that trash like Zhou Yi is not to be spared from being thrown away. Zhou Yi, lying on the ground, realizes that the commander used him as bait so that others could escape. He can't believe his fate, desperately pondering why survival is so difficult for him. The thought flashes through his mind that a weak man without ability in this world is sooner or later discarded. His eyes clouded with tears as something small moved nearby. He notices a cockroach crawling on his arm and bitterly realizes that even insects have adapted to this world better than he has. At the last moment, a monster with a giant maw appears before his eyes, and he weakly thinks, in the next life. In the last moment before his death, Zhou Yi thinks that if he became a cockroach, his life would be much easier. Suddenly, an unknown body modification system is launched, but the first attempts at reconstruction are unsuccessful. After 1,000,000 attempts, the system finally announces that the reconstruction was successful. A strange rustling sounds in the dark alley, creating an unsettling atmosphere. Zhou Yi regains consciousness. His mind filled with confusion, he wonders if he is dead. He tries to raise his arm, but realizes with horror that his limbs no longer resemble human limbs. Up ahead, he notices a mirror, which causes him to move closer to examine himself. A cockroach appears in the reflection in front of him, and his eyes widen with shock. The realization slowly dawns on him. He has become a cockroach, and his own reflection frightens him. In a panic, he screams, not believing what is happening, "Mommy, have I really become a little cockroach?" The protagonist is surprised to realize that he has an extra pair of arms. However, moving them does not cause him any discomfort, as if he had always had them with him. He notices that the only thing causing him discomfort is the new muscles on his back, which he's not used to yet. Before he can make sense of the situation, he suddenly starts to fall, frantically screaming and trying to stop it. As he falls, he realizes that his wings move if he controls his back muscles. However, he does not yet know how to control them. Frustrated with his situation, he exclaims that if he had known his dying wish would come true, he would have chosen something else. Suddenly, a shining silhouette appears before him, calling him an insatiable human being and rebuking him for mocking the feelings of the cockroach god. The creature goes on to say that in the last 5,000 years, he is the first person to have begged the cockroach god for strength. However, he is now disappointed in his new state of mind. The hero realizes that his expectations have been met, and is surprised to notice that the manga did not deceive him. In a burst of emotion, he changes his stance and calls the shining being system brother and then even father, apologizing for his words. However, the cockroach god does not respond to his pleas and simply disappears, leaving the hero alone with his new body. A message appears on the system screen. "The system is down. You are hated by the cockroach god." The protagonist looks at this in utter shock. He realizes that he seems to have hit the cockroach god dead on and is now left without a system. Several days pass, during which he desperately tries to call up the system, but to no avail. He shouts, "The system!" but there is no answer. Despite all attempts, the system still does not respond. He begins to realize that his situation is getting worse. Eventually, he realizes that he can now understand cockroach language. He hears the other cockroaches whispering, not knowing what to do with him. One evening, he contemplates his new life again. Even though he wished to become a cockroach himself, he can't shake the feeling that he looks disgusting. Soon he notices the other cockroaches gathering in company and eating something with gusto. He looks at it with disgust and then realizes that it's their own feces. One of the cockroaches happily declares that poop should be eaten while it's hot and calls him to join the feast. Terrified, he screams for the man to stay away from him, not wanting to participate in this madness. However, the cockroach doesn't give up, holding out a piece to him. Zhou throws himself at it in panic, repeating that he doesn't want it. The cockroach tries to justify himself to his fellow cockroach, but the latter claims with obvious resentment that he was shot in the heart. However, the protagonist is not interested in apologizing. He points out that his offender's breath smells like shit and advises him not to open his mouth before speaking. Gradually, he begins to realize that his human genes have made him stronger, but at the same time he is frightened by his new tastes. He begins to like the smell of slop. He realizes that if he doesn't find normal food, he'll wake up one day with his face buried in a pile of waste. As he surveys the dump, he remembers that the thick plastic bags block cockroach receptors, but his human mind tells him there's bound to be something edible in a place like this. In his search for food, he finally finds a sealed package of egg yolk pie. True, it expired 3 years ago. Despite this, he considers the find a real jackpot. The system reports that the pie found contains 385 calories and is thankfully still edible. However, his first instinct is to be horrified. 3 years in arrears! How can you eat that? But hunger takes over. Despite its disgusting appearance, the pie smells quite appetizing. Zhou decides that this is a real delicacy for cockroaches, and as he gorges himself on chunks of stale food, he rejoices in his transformation. 10 days later, he sits with another cockroach, contemplating his new life. The cockroach god never showed up, and he realizes that his dream was a mistake. This life is not at all as simple as he thought, and is completely unsuitable for a human being. Zhou even thought of ending this life, but no matter what he did, it didn't help him. After all, we all know that even poisons, water, and falls won't do anything to him. In that case, he decides to find a natural enemy of cockroaches to die. But remembering the incident with the huge monster that ate him, he is afraid to even think about such a thing, and therefore decides to stay alive. In any case, cockroaches are social insects. If he can rule the colony and become king of the cockroaches, his chances of survival will greatly increase. Zhou no longer cared that he had lost his connection with the cockroach god, because with the knowledge from human life, he could gain a happy life. He started by complimenting his fellow man, saying he had such a good skeleton, and even said he wanted to be friends with him. But the fatty rejected the offer of friendship, for Joe Yi doesn't even eat hot shit. In that moment, the guy realized, it doesn't matter how comfortable his life is to him. Right now, he wants to rule the cockroaches. These insects see Zhou Yi leading a carefree life. In that case, he decides to prove that he has powers too. And so, on the 20th day of his rebirth, the opportunity finally presented itself. The more mature cockroaches gathered their group, saying that they would move to another area where there would be plenty of food. The adult cockroaches offered to stay here if they wanted to, but then they would be eaten by their enemies, or to go with them and keep up. The fat cockroach heard this and said he couldn't eat shit anymore. Zhou Yi listened to his ramblings and thought that the fat roach was the worst roach he had trained, because he didn't even scavenge the garbage cans for food, but only waited for the next batch of shit. The fatty was crying because he was scared to leave. Zhou Yi was really pissed off by this. Zhou Yi thought that cockroaches are homebodies, because new places scare them. In any case, the adult cockroaches needed a volunteer to scout the road, but there was only dead silence in response. Zhou Yi decided not to help this herd. After all, he wasn't feeding on their shit anyway. To his surprise, the cockroach god came out to contact him, saying that if Zhou Yi accepted this task, the cockroach god would consider forgiving him. At this moment, Zhou Yi resolutely raised his hand, declaring that he would lead them all. The fat cockroach was impressed with Zhou Yi, calling him very brave. Zhou Yi was ecstatic, for at last his cheat code was back. Soon, Zhou Yi and the fatty were at the new place. Zhou Yi realized their mission was to cross this fence. It's quite quiet, so it was easy for Zhou Yi to do so, but the fat man claimed he didn't know anything. It turned out that when the settlement runs out of food, the adult cockroaches send the younger cockroaches to search and explore the new area. But this world is so, and swarms with their natural enemies, so the survival rate among the reconnaissance squad is very low, because they can be destroyed at any time. Zhou Yi was frightened, for this was a common suicide. He even thought that the cockroach god had done this intentionally to thus appease him when Zhou Yi died. In that case, the guy stated that they needed to leave, because he had the ability to feed them. The fat cockroach began to roll in tears. Suddenly, an adult cockroach appeared behind Zhou Yi. He didn't understand where they wanted to go, because there were so many monster corpses to eat behind that fence. Whoever got there first would get it. Zhou Yi was shocked. Had the cockroaches evolved so much that they could now eat alien monsters? It was just a miracle for the guy, because now he would never have a food shortage in the future. In any case, Zhou Yi stated that he had now decided to go on a diet, and so they could go without him and start eating. At this moment, the adult cockroach picked up Zhou Yi like a small insect. Oh, right. The adult cockroach said that if they didn't scout the path, they would become their dinner. Zhou gritted his teeth and gasped, thinking only that even after being reborn, even here, one could not be freed from the law of the jungle. He remembered his past troop. Because they were weak and unsupported, they were sent out to find food. To the strong, they were just a bunch of stupid idiots who wanted to die. The commander felt that going out in search of food was their reward on the road to survival. The adult cockroach also said so, saying that they should thank him because he was giving them a chance to survive, and then threw Zhou Yi down. Soon, the adult cockroach landed on Zhou Yi's face. The guy, under the onslaught of this cockroach, realized he had to return the cheat. He realized that simply becoming a cockroach eating everything was not enough, because it was not enough to survive the apocalypse. Zhou Yi decided he would become stronger. Soon, a group of small cockroaches set out to explore. Zhou Yi ordered the cockroach brothers to keep their eyes open and move forward. If an enemy appeared, they should immediately inform him. Zhou Yi didn't like the fatty being so close, but the fatty could be understood. Even cockroaches can be scared. The boy looked ahead and thought about the fact that this fence looked strange. There is no river here, so why are there rocks against the waves? Observing the larvae, one of the adult cockroaches offered to go after them, as there were no signs of danger. The cockroach agreed. After all, you can't let those maggots get the food first. The adult cockroaches are rushing forward. If enemies appear, they will eat the larvae first. Zhou Yi was indignant. Adult cockroaches can fly, and they themselves will forgive them to go exploring. He called them a bunch of good-for-nothing slackers. Suddenly, something caught Zhou Yi's attention, hence he turned around. He saw a huge red eye in front of him, which made him horrified. Now Zhou Yi realized that those rocks weren't rocks. They were damn toads. They used the protective disguise of rocks to make the victim get hooked. While the fatty was crying in despair, the toad had already launched an attack with its tongue. Zhou Yi ordered everyone to run away as soon as possible, but the toads were stronger, and so many little cockroaches fell a brave death. The system notified Zhou Yi that an enemy had been detected. It was a mutant toad. These toads were stronger than normal toads, but their weakness, they couldn't see stationary prey. The fatty cried out in fear, but Zhou Yi ordered him not to move. After all, toads don't see stationary things. Meanwhile, the cockroach god wanted to give Zhou Yi a choice. For one thing, it will mark a safe route, and Zhou Yi can get out of here. In the second, you have to rescue another cockroach and accept your first loyal subject on your way to becoming king of the cockroaches. Zhou Yi, listening to the cockroach god, didn't understand. How could one become a cockroach king if one died? Suddenly, the guy turned around and looked at the fat man. Zhou Yi remembered the moment of betrayal, because at that moment, he had hoped that someone would come back and help him. While the cockroach god was counting down, Zhou Yi took the fat cockroach by the hand and flew with him because he wished someone would save him like he once did. Speaking of which, the fat one needs to go on a diet. Fatty confessed his love to his cockroach brother, but Zhou Yi told him to shut up as his breath stinks of shit. But what is it? A huge toad has already opened its mouth to swallow the couple. Here it is, the tipping point. Zhou Yi threw the fatty forward, sacrificing himself. The last thing the fatty saw in front of him was his cockroach brother, Zhou Yi, in the mouth of that vile toad. One bite, and it's done. Zhou Yi passed the cockroach god test. This really touched the cockroach god, and so now Zhou Yi has a system available. In that case, the ability Absorption of All Things was activated. Zhou Yi began to gain new skills, Sticky Tongue and Acid Mutant Toad Slime. Meanwhile, the mutant toad's head exploded, making green blood everywhere. For dessert, Zhou Yi received a special award. Yes, he's gotten a body transformation. Now he's not just a simple cockroach. He's an enviable groom for you lovely ladies. Zhou Yi burst out of the mutant toad's body, shouting joyfully that he was back. The cockroach god was impressed that Zhou Yi had kept kindness and justice in his heart in a difficult situation. Now he is worthy to become his follower. Zhou Yi didn't understand. Would he really have to become a cockroach again? The god of cockroaches explained, "Cockroaches are cockroaches. Consider them immortal. Since Zhou Yi is immortal, should I care about his appearance?" Zhou explained that he was not good with literary language at school, so he asked God to say it in a simpler way. The infuriated cockroach god explained that Zhou Yi now had the power of immortality, even in human form. The guy was overjoyed, realizing that he didn't need to become a cockroach again. Meanwhile, the cockroach god was relieved, for Zhou Yi had not abandoned his fellow man even though he knew he was an insect. Suddenly, Zhou Yi felt something while stepping on the ground. Turns out there was that fat cockroach under the guy's foot, and it's in bad shape right now. The cockroach god was not happy. He had crushed the partner he had just saved. Zhou Yi realized that he had turned into a human since he had saved the fat man. Would he really become a cockroach again since he killed the fat man? While Zhou Yi had the god of cockroaches behind him, the guy was thinking about the fact that his life would depend on his acting skills. The moment the cockroach god wanted to do something about Zhou Yi began to cry. He wept because the god had let him live. Zhou Yi raised that fatty with all his heart, and now he sprawled on the ground. In that case, let fate take him with him, for he can't live without his fatty brother. God thought about the fact that these two had a strong bond. In that case, he stated that the fatty was not dead, and therefore asked Zhou Yi not to cry. As it turns out, the fat man is not dead. He will never die, because he is the protector. As long as Zhou Yi is alive, the fat man can be resurrected. God explained, Zhou Yi needs to kill mutant monsters to gather energy and resurrect him again. At this moment, Zhou Yi realized the world was small, and these toads would not escape him. The guy became a titan like Eren Yeager, and said he'd make the toads remember this day forever, remember this fear of humans. But all of a sudden, a toad started jumping on Zhou Yi's body. In the next moment, the toad dealt the guy a powerful blow. But Zhou Yi immediately grabbed the toad and began to crush it, for it was beyond his strength to deal with the giant. The cockroach god warned the guy not to touch the mutant toads. The toad slime was eating away at his flesh, causing Zhou Yi to be in great pain. Meanwhile, the toad was watching Zhou Yi. Toad couldn't understand what it was dangling in front of her. Was it a hairy caterpillar? What can you do? The toad rushed to attack the hairy caterpillar. Grabbing Zhou Yi's hairy caterpillar, the guy began to frantically scream in pain. Zhou Yi abruptly jumped up, then grabbed the toad in spite of the poisonous slime. He turned to the cockroach god, saying that he couldn't even handle small toads. The cockroach god didn't understand. Zhou Yi is a moron? Toads fight using their abilities. He didn't understand why Zhou Yi didn't use his abilities. Abilities? What ability are we talking about? Zhou Yi didn't understand it. Then Bo explained. Eat a toad to get its abilities and antibodies. The more monsters he eats, the stronger he will become. You have to eat anything to become a god. In that case, Zhou Yi decided to roast the toad first. But the cockroach god just put a toad in Zhou Yi's mouth, making him feel uncomfortable. Yes, Zhou Yi had a very strong thirst for strength, but when he tasted the toad, all he could feel was a vile feeling in his mouth. Zhou started throwing up, because he can't do that. The cockroach god declared that if he didn't, he would be eaten by the toads he was now surrounded by. 2 seconds later, Zhou Yi was already completely surrounded by toads. At that moment, Zhou Yi realized that he had spent a lot of effort to survive. But what about now? Now he couldn't eat an ordinary toad? No. Now the meat is coming into his mouth, but why is he so disgusted? Anyway, Zhou Yi did what he needed to do. The system announced that after absorption, biological abilities were detected. Acid slime, frog jumping, and muscle stretching were obtained. Zhou Yi now realized that the toad's abilities didn't work on him. He stomped, kicked, and killed the toads one by one with grace. He even got bored, because now he was invincible. But suddenly, Zhou Yi was blinded by a bright light. Looking closer, he noticed that this group of people who thought Zhou Yi was a naked pervert. Otherwise, how could he explain what he was doing to the toads? It's embarrassing to even talk about. Zhou Yi was overjoyed. Had the comrades really come to save him? But suddenly, he began to be shot at, to which Zhou Yi was extremely surprised. Zhou Yi is standing in the middle of the wasteland, with massive military trucks lined up in front of him, armed soldiers peering out of them. He clearly did not expect such an encounter. Seeing the emblem on the armored vehicle, he whispers in panic, "Elimination Squad," realizing who he's dealing with. He recalls hearing about this organization in a past life. They are elite fighters protecting humanity from monsters during the apocalypse. Their job is to fight monsters on Earth and in the abyss, as well as maintain order and protect the people in the cities. The people living under their protection have returned to a peaceful life. To meet them here means that the situation is serious. With hope in his voice, Zhou Yi asks, "Comrades, have you come to save me?" The next moment his body is pierced by numerous arrows. He looks at them in shock, realizing that saving them was the last thing they were going to do. He falls to the ground, and the soldiers continue to hold their weapons at the ready, making sure the target is hit. 3 fighters in heavy armor approach his prostrate body, reporting, "Ready for capture." Zhou Yi, despite his condition, weakly raises his hand and tries to object. Wait, but his body trembles and the soldiers are in no hurry to change their minds. The system activates, informing him that he can now freely control all the muscles in his body. Seeing that the target is still moving, the squad leader shouts, "The target is a danger! Everyone take a fighting stance." Zhou Yi tries to negotiate, "Hey guys, wait, I'm not a criminal, let me explain myself." But his words go unanswered. One of the soldiers gives the order, "Fire on target!" Suddenly, a woman's voice is heard giving a new order, "Take him alive." Zhou Yi was furious. What the hell is this? Can't you understand human words? Realizing that negotiation is pointless, the motorcyclists surround him, closing a circle around him and preparing to attack. One of the fighters throws an energy whip at him, which entangles his body. Zhou Yi finds himself suspended between moving motorcycles, his body taut as a cable. He screams exhaustedly, realizing he's trapped. At this point, the system reports a new ability, acid slime, which corrodes any materials. When the fighters try to tie him up again, he reflexively uses the slime, breaking the bonds. The girl with purple hair watches this with interest, realizing that he is awakened. Zhou Yi darts in for a takedown, but one of the fighters catches up with him and grabs a body shot. However, the acid causes his glove to begin to decompose, and he loses his grip. The squad is amazed at this, and one of the soldiers looks at the acid residue on his arm with interest. Suddenly, this same warrior jumps on top of him, trying to strike with his fist. Zhou Yi manages to recoil, but the attack is incredibly fast and powerful. Another dude shows up with a bad intent on knocking out Zhou Yi, but the guy deftly dodges his opponent's attack. Zhou Yi cries out in despair, resenting the injustice. Where are the cheats already? At this moment, the system activates his ability. Soon, Zhou Yi abruptly rushed forward at an incredible speed. Upon landing, he's surprised but pleased that the ability worked. Glancing back at his pursuers, he grins smugly, realizing he has a chance to escape. As he jumps, he taunts his opponents, "Still want to catch me?" Suddenly his expression changes as he notices something amiss. In flight, his leg is yanked sharply by the light whip, causing him to lose his balance. The purple-haired girl sitting on the car smirks. "So? Thought you'd run away from me?" She effortlessly tosses him aside and he screams helplessly, lying on the ground. In the next instant, her whips completely entangle him, restraining his movements, and he panics as he realizes he's trapped again. Jo-yi finds himself completely bound by purple threads, and the purple-haired girl standing over him asks the soldier what his number is. The soldier reports that he is the 13th. Without giving Jo-yi any time to think, the girl takes off on her motorcycle, dragging him along the road as he yells in pain. Jo-yi desperately tries to break free, screaming to be spared, but the cars keep moving, ignoring his pleas. Soon they arrive at the base city, protected by huge walls, where the entire convoy is headed. One of the guards at the gate notices Vice Captain Eileen's return and orders the Redbird Gate to be opened. Meanwhile, Eileen warns not to open the gates too wide, or the monsters might take advantage of the situation and enter the city. She deftly enters the fortress while continuing to drag the unfortunate Jo-yi behind her, who can only scream in pain. He ends up being taken to the Elimination Squad prison, where his next fate already awaits. Walking down the hallway in a striped prison jumpsuit, Jo-yi tries to make a joke, complaining that even after the apocalypse, it's illegal to walk around naked. Meanwhile, one of the men in a white coat is surprised that this time the prisoner is not only aware of what is happening, but can also speak, unlike the other 12. Eileen warns not to take the situation lightly. She reports that in 1 week, 12 strange people were found who were completely naked, unable to speak, and only laughing stupidly. She looks at these people locked in a cell. Their postures are unnatural, their gazes blank, and their movements reminiscent of mindless creatures. She admits, it's like they're not human. One of the female scientists suggests just killing them so as not to waste time. Another replies that if they start killing creatures just because of their low intelligence or appearance, they will be no different from the monsters outside the city walls. The hero finally realizes why he was arrested. He is shocked. "I was arrested because I look like those weirdos." He begins to panic when he hears about genetic analysis. In his mind, he asks his cockroach god, "Can we be exposed by genetic analysis?" Immediately, he receives a response in the form of a system message. "What is genetic analysis?" His eyes widen in horror. "I'm finished." They go into a dark room. Eileen says it doesn't matter if he's a pervert or just like those creatures. He's staying here tonight. The female scientist is puzzled. She looks at the cameras and asks in surprise, "Did you move the others?" The cells are empty. In one of them sits a bald man in prison clothes. He is silent, and Eileen stares at him tensely. Suddenly, the head of one of the prisoners inflated to an unnatural size, like a balloon. Eileen was completely shocked by what she saw. The young man looks up in shock, and the women around him are clearly frightened. One of them says, "They are flying through the ceiling." The man, gripped by fear, exclaims, "What the hell is that?" The creepy heads of the prisoners descend from the ceiling, their faces contorted in ghastly grimaces. Someone standing below cries out in horror, realizing that something completely abnormal is happening. One of these flying heads smiles a frightening smile, its lifeless eyes pointing downward. In this nightmarish spectacle, the faces of the prisoners seem even more distorted and unnatural. The young man stares dumbfounded at one of the prisoners, who slowly raises his head. He begins to make a strange sound, clearly foreshadowing something terrible. The prisoner with the shaved head suddenly begins a transformation. His face stretches and his eyes flash with an ominous light. He smiles frighteningly, and purple lines begin to spread across his skin. The next moment, his face explodes into a ghastly mess of eyes and teeth. This thing is no longer a man, but a nightmare incarnate. The woman and the young man turn around in panic, their faces full of horror as they realize what is happening. The creature that had transformed into something monstrous let out long red tentacles, rushing towards them with frightening speed. The young man panics, trying to avoid the attack, as the tentacles rush towards him, and the monster itself takes full form, an ugly, muscular body with a creepy smile and multiple eyes. The purple-haired woman instantly takes up a fighting stance, preparing to repel the attack when one of the tentacles swiftly moves towards her. The girl with purple hair confidently states that it is now clear who the monster really is. One of the scientists is horrified to notice that her body is beginning to be covered in creepy spots. She panics. The spots spread across her body, turning her skin into a deformed mass. She screams in fear and pain. The young man is also infected, but he doesn't lose his temper. He realizes that he has to get out. Suddenly, an interface appears, warning him of parasitism. He urgently needs to do something, or he will turn into a zombie. The monster threateningly states that he wants her body, making the situation even more frightening. Eileen was surprised. She didn't expect this monster to be able to talk, such a species she had never seen before. The monster takes possession of the scientists' bodies and uses them as attack cannon fodder to attack Eileen. The girl activates her power, creating energy threads to repel the attack. She soars sharply into the air using her ability, showing agility and strength. Eileen realizes that it's difficult to deal with parasitic monsters. She realizes that they are still humans and can't be killed. In addition, she has no magic crystals, and her abilities are practically useless here. But soon her attention is drawn to a scalpel lying on a bedside table. Using his ability, he picks up a scalpel and throws it at the monster. But the damn monster is using the two girl scientists as human shields. Realizing this, Eileen pulls her thread back. The scalpel blade stops near the girl's face, just a little more, and someone would need plastic surgery. Holding Joey in its tentacles, the monster called people weak. Joey was on edge at this moment, for he didn't have time to eat the growths before they reappeared again. But God told him to stop talking and swallow quickly. The system notified that parasitic spores were ingested. The ability to resist parasites began to develop. Soon the ability developed from 10% and up to 46%. Eileen, on the other hand, listening to the brandy monster, declared that he was insulting himself. She threw the monster blade again, saying that only a pathetic coward would hide behind hostages. The monster, looking at the girl's futile attack, declared that it was useless, for she would hit her comrade. But it seems the girl had a plan. The flying blades changed their trajectory and rushed towards the monster. The monster was furious. This attack hit both his arms and his back. He started screaming in pain because he didn't expect the attack to be successful. Eileen assumed that the monster's body wasn't strong enough, which was why it had to use living creatures as shields. But what was it? The girl suddenly began to feel pain, and in the same places blades had hit the monster. Eileen didn't understand what was the matter. The monster explained, since the girl had hurt him, he just transferred all the pain and wounds to these girls, and his wounds were starting to heal by the way. Eileen realized that this ability was quite problematic. Suddenly, the monster announced that the girl was finally caught. Eileen looks at her hand and realizes that something is happening. Her hand began to glow with an ominous red light. Soon her hand ceased to obey, and then began to strangle her mistress. The monster, however, tells her that she can't succeed because she can't destroy the spores. Now she's at his mercy. But suddenly, the monster's gaze changed. The girl began to laugh echodotically. Eileen explained that it was lucky that she could catch herself. She stated that someone else he could infect, but her web could control more than just the enemy's body. Eileen used her thread to control the infected arm. Using a scalpel with thread, she cut where the infected spores were to prevent further contamination. She even grinned, because it was such a pity for the monster that everything was resolved like this. The monster was in agreement that she had managed to break free, but using it a few times, the girl would bleed out and soon be unable to fight. Besides, if Eileen tried to run away, the monster promised to kill those girls and then run away as well. Eileen stated that the monster could scream before she killed it. Even if the monster begs for her to leave, Eileen won't run away. Meanwhile, Joey continued to absorb the infected spores, which attracted the monster's attention. He wondered why on earth he couldn't control that guy. In that case, he decides to kill Joey, but the guy breaks the shackles at that very second. The guy realizes he can't dodge this attack, and now he's going to be finished. At this moment, a purple web began to appear around his body. In the next instant, Eileen pulled Joey towards her, thus saving him from the monster's strike. The monster didn't seem to like this and was even puzzled. Joey fell to the ground, looking at Eileen's black panties. He thanked his goddess for saving him, for beyond that, he had seen a miracle. Eileen looked at Joey like he was garbage. Taking him by his clothes, she wondered, was he really a pathetic pervert from the beginning? Joey confirmed the hunch, telling his sister that he had been saying that all along. Eileen let go of the guy and came to a conclusion. Since the monsters can't infect him, she has two options. First, they die together, and second, she stops the monster and he tells the world. Joey didn't know what to say, but in the next second, he stepped forward and declared that he was choosing the third plan. Eileen didn't understand. What other third plan was there? Joey said that they would team up and beat this guy into a vegetable together. Eileen was surprised that Joey wanted to go for this at the cost of his life. At this moment, Joey recalled the moment of his death, the moment when he was abandoned. What Joey hated most about people was when they, under the influence of their own cowardice, threw their comrades to be torn apart by monsters. The guy stated, "People who abandon their comrades are worse than monsters." Eileen was surprised that Zhou Yi was so brave, but she mentally called him retarded. To be honest, the young man's confidence lies in the fact that the system has told him that the monster is actually weak, and it is only strong due to its parasitic abilities, and normal attacks can be feared. With this thing under his belt, Zhou Yi will definitely be able to live happily and work in the territory guarded by the elimination squad. The monster was still furious. He thought that humans were inferior creatures, because even when they fought, they thought about attracting the attention of the opposite sex. The monster attacked the couple with his deadly, infected tentacles. Zhou Yi realizes that he is useless in battle, so he asks Eileen to control his body. He admits that he's not afraid of parasites, but he's clearly not a good fighter. Eileen agrees, but warns that she can't guarantee his safety. She activates her abilities, triggering threads that envelope Zhou Yi's body. The energy of the threads filled his body, causing his muscles to move faster and more precisely. Eileen takes control with confidence, preparing to direct him to attack. Under Eileen's control, Zhou Yi rushes forward. The enemy taunts, stating that his tentacles cannot be avoided. The monster confidently says that Zhou Yi won't be able to break through his puppets. Eileen, wasting no time, activates her power, strengthening Zhou Yi. Zhou Yi bursts into action, and Eileen precisely coordinates his movements. The enemy's red threads rush towards him, but he keeps moving. Eileen pulls the strings, and Zhou Yi confidently dodges his opponent's attacks. He rushes towards one of the puppets, attacking it. With Eileen's strength, he delivers a crushing blow, breaking through the enemy's defenses. The female puppet screams in terror. Eileen activates her threads and commands, "Pressure!" handing over control of Zhou Yi's body. He instantly rushes forward, making a low dash under the blows of the enemy. In a deft leap, Zhou Yi finds himself above his opponent, preparing to attack. The monster notices the change and mutters in bewilderment that he has gotten smarter. Finally, realizing what's up, the monster realizes that Eileen is controlling Zhou Yi's movements. The girl smiles in agreement. Indeed, how clever. Zhou Yi swiftly approached the monster, his fist already raised to strike. He shouts with rage, "Die!" gathering all his strength in an attack. However, the monster mockingly remarks that his defenses are too strong. Despite this, Zhou Yi has no intention of stopping and lands a mighty blow. Zhou Yi activates his ability. The system screen confirms the activation has begun. His body is enveloped in light, and his muscle stretch and acid slime abilities are activated. He swiftly rushes at the monster, his attack accompanied by powerful energy. The enemy begins to decompose from the acid slime, emitting a death scream. Eileen watches in amazement, not knowing that Zhou Yi had such abilities. The acid continues to eat away at the monster's flesh, and it begins to lose its shape. Zhou Yi's final blow, tearing his opponent's body apart. His gaze becomes cold and confident, like a true fighter. However, the monster does not give up, stating that it can tolerate damage and will survive. Suddenly, he notices something strange. Panic appears in his eyes. The red monster panics as he realizes that his wound is not healing, which seems impossible for him. He notices Eileen sitting next to the two people lying down and looks at her in surprise. Eileen reports with a smug smile that she has already managed to get rid of his parasitic spores. The girl clutches something disgusting covered in blood in her hand and crushes it with ease. Looking at the result, she admits with a chuckle that she enjoys seeing the monster in this state. The monster falls silent, its eyes widening in horror as it realizes the situation is out of control. Suddenly, it opens its mouth, and strange sounds start coming out of it. Soon, the bloated heads begin to explode, followed by a waterfall of blood. Zhou Yi and Eileen watch in amazement, not immediately realizing what the monster is up to. Zhou Yi didn't understand. Was the monster really collecting blood from corpses? The creature begins to transform, its body beginning to churn and change, an ominous eyeball peering out from the depth. Eileen and Zhou Yi tense up, their gazes full of concentration. Clearly something is going wrong. The blood begins to bubble and form a new sinister mass. The process seems irreversible. The swirls of bloody substance continue to swirl, forming something even more dangerous. A new form of creature appears before them, huge, made of blood, with burning eyes, emitting an incredible menace. The creature finally transforms, screaming wildly, its body taking on a new, even more horrifying form. It mockingly declares that this is the first time people are seeing his true colors, and hopes they don't disappoint him. The creature instantly rushes to attack. It speeds so fast that the girl barely has time to react. The next instant, she is thrown powerfully back into the wall, the impact so strong that the metal surface sags. The girl crashes into the wall with a scream, pain on her face from the impact, and the attack has clearly just begun. The young man turns around in horror, realizing that something dangerous is happening. Eileen is breathing heavily, blood flowing from the corner of her lips. She realizes that the enemy's power level is far beyond their expectations. In the next instant, a red hand pierces her chest, and the shock in her eyes is replaced by pain. The monster wastes no time. It grabs her and throws her aside with force like a rag doll. The girl flies through the air, hitting the walls at tremendous speed. However, the monster doesn't stop. He follows her, intent on finishing what he started. The girl falls, shattering the tiles beneath her, her body covered in wounds and her mind clouded with pain. The monster slowly approaches, watching her helplessness, his predatory smile growing wider. Suddenly something hits him, forcing him to stop. He is surprised. Who dared to attack? He turns his head and notices a young man standing behind him. The young man panics as he realizes how bad it is, but it's too late to retreat. The monster rushes at him with wild speed, and the guy only manages to shriek in surprise. The beast's blow of incredible force sends the young man flying, blood spurting from his mouth. It crashes into the wall with a clatter, leaving a deep dent in it. An alarming message pops up on the screen. Danger! Broken bones all over the body. Internal organs damaged. Then the system reports, lethal damage detected. The immortality skill has been activated. The regeneration process begins. The body recovers, and the damage disappears. His legs regain their strength, and he slowly rises to his feet. Upon waking up, he screams in terror, thinking he is dying. The cockroach god warns Zhou Yi, "Don't move. If you get hit again, I don't guarantee recovery." Zhou Yi lies on the floor, pressed into the surface, and realizes that the only way to save himself is to play dead. He barely opens his eye as he watches the scene, and mentally tells the girl to hang in there, because victory depends on her. The monster, exuding a terrifying aura, approaches while Zhou Yi remains motionless, hoping that the enemy will lose interest in him. The monster looks at his lying body with disdain and grinning utters, "So weak, so weak." Suddenly there is the sound of a blow, and the monster flinches, clearly not expecting the attack. The girl rushes to attack at breakneck speed, her strike aiming straight for the monster's head. However, the monster reacts faster than she expected and intercepts her leg, preventing the attack from reaching its target. The girl is in shock. She can't believe her attack didn't work. The monster, smirking, intercepts her movement and then tosses her aside with fury. With savage force, he slams her to the floor again, leaving deep cracks where he hit her. The monster didn't want to stop. He tossed the girl straight up into the ceiling. Eileen was bleeding, just a little more, and she would be finished. The monster ripped out an iron chair, saying that they had once chained him to this place. Expressing his displeasure that he was uncomfortable, he picked up an iron chair and threw it at the falling girl. Eileen slammed into the wall with such force that she couldn't move. Her both legs were broken, causing the girl to be in a hell of a lot of pain. Luckily, she could still control her arm. Zhou Yi watched what was happening, realizing that he couldn't help her right now. Even the vice captain of the elimination squad can't destroy this monster. Zhou Yi wondered, then who could save them? At that moment, someone called out to the young man. It was a scholar who asked for something to give to Eileen. In his hands was some kind of red crystal that should unleash Eileen's power. Not thinking long, Joe takes this crystal, but comes to the conclusion that he does not even know how he can give her this stone. The monster was closing in on the girl. At this moment, the cockroach god appears and informs that Zhou Yi can get through to the girl using his muscle-stretching skill. According to his calculations, the success rate is 10%, which Zhou Yi was not very happy about, because 10% is very little. God asked him to choose, either 10% to try and it would work out, or 100% that he would die without doing anything. Gritting his teeth, Zhou Yi made up his mind. He started to stand up, activating the skill of stretching a muscle. To hell with it! Zhou Yi rushed forward towards the girl, but the monster immediately noticed his body movements. The cockroach god didn't expect the monster to react so quickly, and now the chance of survival was 5%. In that case, Zhou Yi would have to fight. Taking a leap, Zhou Yi found himself above the monster's head. God stated that there was only a 1% chance of success, but for Zhou Yi, it seemed like he had succeeded. But suddenly the monster caught hold of the guy's leg and then wondered what he was doing. There was now 0% chance of success, and Zhou Yi was sealed into the ground with a sharp movement. Wallowing on the floor, the monster decided to crush the guy's pesky head. Zhou Yi began to think about the fact that there was no chance of him succeeding at anything. But still, this was his last chance. With a sharp movement, it threw the red crystal at Eileen. After that, the monster crushed Zhou Yi with its huge foot. The monster began to roar like crazy, calling the young man a weakling. But suddenly, his gaze changed. Beneath his foot, he noticed a still-alive young man being enveloped by a purple thread. Looks like Mr. Red Monster is in trouble. It was then that the monster realized that this web was connected to that girl. Meanwhile, Eileen said that she was touched that Zhou Yi had handed over the magic crystal to her at the risk of his life. At this moment, a purple web began to envelop her entire body, and after moving his hand, the monster also began to be absorbed by the web, which he was clearly not happy about. The girl pulled the web toward her, and the monster lost its balance and fell to the ground. Calling the spider sword into her hand, the girl jumped up to end this battle once and for all. But it's not over yet. The red monster was alive, plus it stated that humans were still weak, even if they used their power. He easily broke the spider sword in half. Then he grabbed the frightened Ailin by the neck. In the next instant, the red monster viciously pierced the girl's body, making her blood everywhere. Zhou Yi, leaning on his arm, slowly rises to his knees, clutching his wound. In the distance, the monster is still standing still. Eileen hangs limply. She's been grabbed by the monster, its tentacle tightly wrapped around her body. Zhou Yi realizes with despair on his face that the situation is catastrophic. There is almost no chance of victory. The monster looks coldly at Eileen and says, "Die." Suddenly, there are sharp flashes of red light, like something exploding. Looks like it was blood. The monster flinches, his body covered in impact marks, and he abruptly turns around with a surprised look. In addition, his arms had been severed. Zhou Yi also notices this, his eyes going wide. He clearly didn't expect something like this. At that moment, a tall man with long hair appears, carrying the injured Eileen in his arms. Soon more men appear, wearing exactly the same armor. The monster, frowning, looks at them and utters, "Who are you?" 3 fighters in high-tech armor appear at the scene of the battle. One of them is holding Eileen in his arms. Judging from her condition, she is badly injured. A woman with long white hair notices a body on the floor and stops. She examines it carefully, as if assessing its condition. She examines the people lying there and says that their insides, bones, and muscles are almost completely destroyed. From her tone, the situation is critical. The woman pulls out a green crystal and says she will begin treatment immediately. She is introduced as the captain of the 10th Extermination Squad. The man with red hair holding Eileen assures them that no monster can hurt them. He is referred to as the captain of the 2nd Extermination Squad. A third man says with a chuckle that he will take it upon himself to have fun with this monster. He is introduced as Commander-in-Chief Carey William. However, he is warned that this monster is no ordinary monster and is asked to be careful. In response, Carey just smiles broadly and says he's special too, clearly not taking the threat seriously. The woman with white hair irritably tells both of them to be quiet, as she needs silence for healing. She raises the green crystal, concentrating. The crystal begins to glow, releasing a powerful green glow. She is clearly using a healing ability, but how effective is it? Greenish energy penetrates the ground, activating a powerful spell. As a result, huge flowers appear in front of people, with wounded people inside. Eileen and another woman have woken up inside these flower cocoons, and a man in armor is rushing towards them. Zhou Yi also finds himself in one of the flowers, and looks around in surprise. Seeing a few flowers around, he is perplexed. Flower cocoons? An unexpected warmth engulfed his body, as if he were immersed in a hot spring. He feels the wounds begin to heal, and relaxes. Suddenly, the cockroach god appears, and injects him with a scream. Zhou Yi cries out in pain, and in the distance, a girl with white hair says in surprise that it shouldn't have hurt so much. The little creature smirks and advises Zhou Yi to take a closer look at the fight, for he has a real spectacle ahead of him. The man in armor introduces himself as Carey Villian, commander of the Annihilation Squad, and suggests that the creature talk. The red-skinned monster replies with a disgruntled look on his face that he doesn't negotiate with food. The atmosphere is heating up. The two opponents are facing each other without averting their gaze. Suddenly, streams of blood start running down the walls. The man in armor looks up with a wary expression, waiting for development. The blood continues to flow and the tension rises. The monster announces that it has already devoured all of its brethren that were here. The creature, surrounded by red streams, threateningly declares that everyone here will die. The monster begins to laugh, waving its tentacles, preparing to attack. Oh, but what happens next? Will it be the end of them, or will the squad leader defeat the monster? Or maybe Zhou Yi himself will reveal his hidden power. All in all, you want part 2? Let's put 1,000 likes for the new installment. Also, if you've seen it to the end, write a secret word in the comments. Spider. See you later.